Welcome to the Christian Stuff Podcast. My name is Jeremiah, and today's episode is entitled Drug Stuff. We're going to be diving into the topic of drug addiction and hearing a testimony from our guest, Eddie, who happens to be one of my best friends for 30 years. So I'm excited to have you here, Eddie. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So my first question is, how about you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, I grew up in San Diego, 2 doors down from where you grew up. I gotta admit, I'm a little nervous about talking about this, but I feel like I have a testimony that I have to share.
All right. Well, let's get things going here. So I have basically no experience with drugs, and many of our listeners don't either. It's something that's kind of taboo in Christian culture and kept a secret. Can you talk a little bit about drug culture and how you got involved in drugs in the first place?
Well, in high school, I started smoking weed, drinking, graduated to methamphetamine about 3 years later. Basically, I was working at a lumberyard, overnight shift. I had a friend come up to me and ask me if I wanted to try something. We drove around the corner. He passed me a pipe. I had no idea what I was doing at the time. I tried it, ended up liking it, like a fish to water. It was something that I never experienced before. I was thinking faster than I ever could. I was moving faster than I ever did. And I was hooked.
So that drug was methamphetamine, correct?
Yes.
All right. And can you tell the listeners a little bit about the drug and its effects on people? What type of drug is it and so forth?
It's what you would refer to as an upper. Basically, you do it, you're up for days, all night. No, you don't eat. All you do is they call it tweaking. I mean, it all depends on what you like to tweak on. Like, some people like to work on cars all night. You've seen those people, some people clean their house ridiculously. Everybody had different things. I would use, and me and my friends would just talk all night. And it was just the stupidest conversations, but it's just, that's what we did.
So I would imagine that you weren't really able to function in society, hold down a job. I remember you shared that with me. So how are you supporting the addiction?
Hate to admit it, but I stole stuff from Home Depot, Walmart, whatever store, and I would go trade it for drugs to my dealer. Basically, when you're in that kind of life, you're surrounded by criminals all the time. So I got to know some of the best criminals in San Diego. They would teach me how to do things without getting caught, ways around the law, stuff like that, But when you're around those kind of people, any moment can be your last. Especially because they're on drugs too. So basically, let me put it this way. When you're on drugs for so long and you're up night after night after night, without sleep, without food, without, when you don't get rest, your mind starts losing it. And you start thinking that people are against you. You start thinking that everybody's out to get you. I remember 3 o'clock in the morning peeking out of my window looking for cops, and there becomes a lot of mistrust. And people who you think are your friends at the time, they start mistrusting you. They start thinking you're up to something. It can go really bad really quick, is the best way to put it on a Christian podcast.
Yeah, I imagine we got to keep it somewhat confidential. We don't want anybody coming for you. So my next question is, what is the craziest thing you ever experienced when you were addicted to drugs?
When I was up for probably 5 nights in a row, I was on a sick one for a while, and then coming down, I finally was able to get a little bit of rest. I was sleeping, and then all of a sudden my eyes were open, and I felt like something was sitting on me. I couldn't move any of my body parts. I couldn't move anything but my eyes. Out of nowhere, I heard a whisper in my ear. And it was very clear and it said, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And it was in the most evil voice I could have ever imagined. And I was shook. And, it was an experience that I don't even feel comfortable. I don't even like talking about it because it was, I stayed up shaking. Like, it was the first time I ever shook from fear. And I was sitting on the edge of my bed, shaking, trembling, scared to lay back down. I started doing more drugs because I didn't want to fall asleep again.
That is insane, man. Like, I've got goosebumps. I know that our listeners are freaked out. And it just goes to show you that these drugs and this culture and this thing is something that the devil uses to destroy people's lives. You know what I mean?
There's a real demonic side of these drugs. And anything that tears you away from Christ, and not even just a little, drugs will tear you so far away from God. And you are literally serving the devil.
Spoiler alert, you are no longer addicted to drugs, so congratulations on that. You want to tell us a little bit about how you got out of that lifestyle and what brought you to where you are today?
Yeah. 8 years clean, by the way. It started with people getting arrested around me. There was people who were getting locked up, mainly my dealers, so I was running out of places to find drugs. Then I was starting to get in trouble with my family. I was acting a fool. For a little bit, I was out on the streets living in a park. At that point, I had what I call a come to Jesus moment, where I prayed, and I don't know if I really wanted to quit at the time, but I knew I had to turn to God because things were just not going right, and shortly after, an opportunity for me came up to become a truck driver. So truck driving was an opportunity for me to get away from the people who were left around and get away from that lifestyle for a little bit. And I remember the first time I went out, I stayed out on the road for 6 months. And at that point, I realized I was done. That God delivered me.
That's amazing. So it really seems like a big part of the practical ways you got out of drugs was getting away from those relationships and friendships with those people that were in the lifestyle. Do you have any other advice for people who are struggling with drugs or their family members that might be listening?
Yeah, it starts with getting away from what you call your friends, because all they're going to do is bring you down. So when I got away from all my friends, because my friends would give me free drugs. Like, there was not even a problem getting it. But it was actually, it was an eye-opening experience where I started to turn towards God more. I started praying more. As I'm becoming cleaner, I knew that God delivered me. So that was what just motivated me to keep turning towards God, keep praying. I didn't know one Bible verse but John 3:16. And the only reason was because of Stone Cold Steve Austin.
So what do you think would be the most important thing for Christians to understand about people who are addicted to drugs?
It's hard because, like, when I drive down the street and I see homeless people who are obviously addicted, my heart goes out to them because I've been there. It's hard when you grow up in a household. Take you, for example, who grew up with the pastor that's a father.
Yeah.
You go to Christian high school, Christian college.
Yeah, for real.
You don't really see it from that angle. But I've seen it from that angle. I literally slept in a park bathroom, eating out of a trash can. Yeah. So when we look at these people, we need to love them because there's still so much potential.
Yeah.
In each person, the light of Christ can reach anybody. Amen. And we shouldn't just shun them because they're dirty, they smell bad. You know what I mean? It's just I don't know.
So after you quit using drugs, how did you stay clean? What was that process like?
Well, it was actually a pretty long process. It started with me being a truck driver and being over the road. And one day out of nowhere in Dallas, I had my first panic attack. And I started having really bad anxiety. And it got to the point where I thought that everything was going to kill me. So even doctor recommended medicine. I didn't want to take it. I just, so it's weird. I feel like God blessed me with anxiety, which might sound weird, but it actually saved my life. Because I quit for 6 months, no problem, but there's no telling if I would have ever went back. The anxiety made it a for sure, I'm not going back kind of thing. So it was a huge blessing.
So my last question's pretty intense, and just want to give the audience a warning here, but why am I such a better fisherman than you? Like, do you know? I don't know why. It just seems like every time we go fishing together, I catch really more fish. Yeah.
Just so you know what he's talking about, me and him, we lost track of each other for probably about, what would you say, like 10 years?
Yeah.
And we started getting back hanging out by fishing because he wanted to teach his kids how to fish and he didn't know how to fish. So I was giving him constant lessons.
Lies.
So that's how we got our relationship back, was through fishing.
Yeah. Well, the truth is I catch bigger fish. But anyway, really, really excited to have you on. I feel like you've shared some pretty epic stuff. I feel like I understand drugs a lot more, and I have a very different way that I look at people who use drugs because of your testimony and your friendship. And so I think it's really important that people hear what you have to say. So I'm glad that you came on here, even though you hate talking in front of people, you hate talking on an audio and on mic and all of that, but I can tell that the Lord has really put it on your heart to share your story. So thank you for coming, man.
Thank you for having me. And I just wanted to say that it's such an important thing. If you have somebody who's using in your life, there are programs, Teen Challenge, there's all kinds of places that will help them. And they'll do it through a biblical method, you know, and to me, that's the only way to truly quit, is to give it to God. So if you have somebody in your life who's struggling with these problems, get them help. You know, try to get them to a program. You know, it makes a difference. And, you know, once again, thank you for having me.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'm going to go ahead and leave the Teen Challenge information and some other drug rehabilitation and outreach information in the description. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star review on the iTunes store. If you don't like the podcast app, you hate computers, whatever it is, you can find an easy to listen to version of the podcast at podpoint.com/Christian-stuff-podcast. Please subscribe on YouTube. You can find the channel link in the description. Thank you so much for listening one more time.
And I hope you like my Christian stuff.